Thank y'all. If you haven't introduced yourself yet, please continue to do so. I see a few more folks are jumping in, but we're going to go ahead and get started because we're a couple minutes after the call and we have a lot of content for you today. Um, if we haven't met before, my name is Candace Davis, and I'm the Network Community Manager for Swipe Out Hunger. I sit in Houston, Texas, and I help lead these calls, monthly series, bringing you question or answers to questions that you've been asking across the network. And one that we've heard so many times is how to use data, how to collect data. Should we be collecting data? And we're so happy to be talking about that today and talking about a few different strategies, but specifically the strategies from Trellis. Allison's going to be joining us here in a minute to walk us through their work with their student survey. Um, as we go through the content, of course, feel free to ask questions in the chat. There will be a Q&A session at the end where you'll have an opportunity to come off mic if you want to do that. And Allison's agreed to answer any and all questions y'all might have. So we're excited. What you can expect, of course, the presentation from Trellis will come up first. Love it, the Q&A. And then at the very end, we'll be revealing another toolkit for y'all to use on your campuses. If you've been joining us, you know. We want to make sure you walk away with some actionable next steps. So you'll hear some from Trellis, but you'll also get some in that toolkit. And then we'll close with what are the rest of the opportunities for the rest of the academic year. We still have 2 months to go. Again, Allison Cornett, the Director of Research at Trellis Strategies, we're so lucky, agreed to share all of our learnings and the team's learnings across their student survey experience this year. And I know that there is a lot to go over, so I'm going to pass it to Allison very quickly and kick it off now.
Awesome. Thanks, Candace. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, does that look good? Everyone can see
Great.
that? Okay, perfect. Alrighty. So like Candace said, today I'm going to be covering some of our undergraduate student results from our fall 2023 Student Financial Wellness Survey. Let's just go ahead and get in it. Here's just a little bit about our organization. So we're a nonprofit based out of Central Texas that's focused on advancing educational attainment and workforce development. We have kind of a full service research firm and consultants who are experts at turning research into practice. And one of our flagship projects and kind of key sources of insights here at Trellis Strategies is our Student Financial Wellness Survey, also known as SFWS or simply Wellness. And this is a comprehensive, self-reported online instrument that documents the financial well-being and student success indicators of post-secondary students across the country. It is completely free for institutions to participate in, and we use survey results to produce free customized reports and infographics for participating schools, but we also aggregate the data to create public-facing reports on various topics from the survey, including basic needs, mental health, experiences of diverse student groups like first-generation students, students who work, and student parents. And we've also seen institutions use the results to raise money, develop programs, assess their ongoing or new initiatives, but also just build that culture of caring for their students on campus to better support and love their students. So I am going to just pause on the slide for about 20 seconds to give y'all time to download our aggregate report and infographic covering our fall 2023 survey administration. So this was back in October to November of 2023. We are working on our fall 2024 report, putting the finishing touches on that, and that will be coming out in just a few weeks. Alrighty, so going back to our fall 2023 administration, we have fielded this survey every year on an annual basis since 2018, but today we're going to talk about the findings resulting from the 142 colleges and universities who participated in our fall 2023 administration. So we collected just over 62,300 responses out of over 700,000 students for a response rate of 8.8%. And this included just over 33,000 students at 94 two-year institutions, and a little below 30,000 students at 48 four-year universities across the country. And so before kind of diving into our findings here, I wanted to just give a quick overview of what these respondents look like. I'm not going to cover every line on this slide or the next, but want to just highlight some specific demographics so we can kind of better understand our respondents and put them in context. So in terms of race and ethnicity, we saw 44% were white, 25% identified as Hispanic or Latino, and 15% identified as Black or African American. 5% of our respondents identified as Asian, Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander, and then 1% as American Indian or Alaska Native. And as we see with voluntary surveys down here, female students were overrepresented at 75%, 25% of our respondents were male, and then 1% were either not reported or preferred to self-identify. And then just some more quick demographics. The average age of our respondents was 25.5 years old. Our average GPA was 3.1 on that 4.0 scale. And then we also had a split in our enrollment. 61% were enrolled full-time and 39% were enrolled part-time. And then beyond these kind of basic demographics like race, age, gender, we also collect information on whether the student belongs to certain populations that are often more at risk of experiencing barriers to success in their higher education journey. So this includes first generation students, where 36% of respondents said they were the first in their immediate family to attend college. We saw 21% self-identified as a parent, and parenting students in general are more likely to struggle with financial insecurity and basic needs insecurity, but are actually less likely to use on-campus resources like food pantries when compared to their childless peers. We also saw 68% of our surveyed students were working for pay while enrolled in college, and that's either part-time or full-time. And then 2% of our 2023 respondents reported being a former foster youth. And while this is obviously a really small overall percentage of the population, these students often lack the financial means, stability, and support to be successful in college. And this translates into fewer than 1 in 10 former foster youth holding a college degree. And that's either from a 2-year or a 4 years. So this is a population that's really vulnerable and really needs our special attention and interventions in order to thrive. And lastly, we saw 15% of our respondents identified as LGBTQIA+, and this is a population that encounters higher rates of discrimination, social stigma, basic needs insecurity, and then also reports of poor mental health when compared to their peers. Now let's go ahead and get into some of our survey findings. So I know everyone on this call knows that going to college can be a rewarding and fulfilling experience, but it can also come with many challenges and difficulties. We see that students face hardships and stressors that affect their academic performance, their mental health, and also their basic needs. So in this section, we're going to look at some of our key findings on financial security and then explore a little bit of our data on student well-being in college, focusing on food security, housing security, homelessness, and mental health. So for college students, financial security means having enough funds to comfortably manage educational and living expenses, freedom from overwhelming financial concerns, and the ability to make major life decisions without financial limitations. And unfortunately, many of our students are facing financial insecurity and they're really struggling to balance the cost of education with their personal expenses. And in the fall of 2023 Student Financial Wellness Survey, 56% of our undergraduate students overall indicated they would have trouble obtaining $500 in cash or credit to meet an unexpected need in the next month. And this statistic isn't surprising when you consider that I think an estimated 45% of American adults would not be able to cover a $1,000 emergency cost without turning to a source of credit. But it just really illustrates how financially fragile these students are. And when we're looking at the self-reported frequency of running out of money, which we define as exhausting all available funds, we found that 23% of our students had run out of money 8 or more times in the past year. So this is measured from January 1st 2023 to the time that they took the survey in October to November of the same year. So they're running out of money a lot. More 8 or more times is really frequent. And we're seeing this not only strain students' budgets, but then it also jeopardizes their ability to meet their basic needs. And this translates into financial anxieties, where 53% of our students across both 2 and 4 year schools were worried about being able to pay their current monthly expenses. So this can really contribute to kind of a ripple effect that we see impact their basic needs and security, including their food security. So in the Student Financial Wellness Survey, we use a short form validated scale from the US Department of Agriculture to measure the prevalence of food security in the previous 30 days from the respondent taking the survey. So timing wise, the survey opened in late October to mid-November. This means that the students have already mostly received their aid packages and they're well in the swing of things for the semester. And when we look at this metric, we see that more than 2 in 5 students have low or very low food security, with the rates being identical across both the 2 and 4 year sectors. And then over here in the far right, we see that 23% of our students were experiencing very low food security. And this is the most extreme form of the condition where we see maybe hunger, severely disrupted eating patterns, but also reduced food intake. And looking at the indicators of food insecurity, we saw many students report food insufficiency, basically where they're not having enough food to eat because of a lack of money or resources. The most common sign of food insecurity among our surveyed students was the inability to eat balanced meals, which 44% of our students faced. We also saw 38% bought food that lasts and then had no money to get more. More than a third, 35%, cut the size of their meals or ate less than they felt like they should. And I think most concerningly here, not that these other indicators aren't concerning, but the most concerning is that 27% were hungry but did not eat because they did not have any money. And then we're looking at this, our special populations that I mentioned earlier, parents, LGBTQIA plus students, and first generation students were all more likely to experience these indicators than their peers. They're just at higher risk of experiencing these kind of indicators of food insecurity. We also measure awareness and utilization of food pantries. And like the folks on this call know, many colleges have implemented on-campus food pantries or closets to help address the crisis of food insecurity and hunger among their students. And these are a lot more common now than when I was in college back in 2012. There were just 80 food pantries on college campuses across the country, and today there are more than 800. So that's a really great thing to see. But I think looking back to our survey results, of the 142 colleges and universities that participated in the fall 2023 survey, 122 had at least one food pantry or closet available to students on their campus. So that translates into about 86% of our participating institutions offering this really valuable resource. And when we limited our analysis to just those students attending those 122 schools, we found that 53% right here in this bottom chart either did not know of the food pantry on their campus or indicated incorrectly, this 3% here, that their campus did not have a food pantry. And despite the high rates of food insecurity that we see in this slide, only 15% of our respondents indicated visiting a food pantry either on or off campus since January 1st of that 2023 year. And there can be a lot of reasons for this, including lack of awareness, maybe feelings of stigma or shame, but also time constraints. And just really highlighting that I think awareness is a pretty big issue here, especially with these students, these 53% of students. And we can come back to the food pantries findings in a little bit, but also want to touch on housing security. And as we know from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, physiological and safety needs like stable housing are really essential for anyone, but especially for students to thrive. Without a stable living environment, it can be really difficult for individuals to focus on higher level needs like relationships, academics, and then other avenues for personal growth. So this next area of our slide deck kind of focuses on housing security, which is really a range of complex housing issues that can include the inability to pay rent, mortgage, or utilities, living in overcrowded spaces, and then in its most extreme form, experiencing homelessness or being unhoused. And in our 2023 survey, we saw 42% of our students report housing insecurity through their responses to the survey, and then 14% were identified as homeless. And again, I'm a researcher and I like to look at the nitty gritty. And so we're going to look at the indicators of housing insecurity here. The most common expression was difficulty paying the full amount of a utilities bill, which was experienced by 26% of our respondents. We saw 24% have difficulty paying their rent or their mortgage. Nearly 1 in 5, 15%, have moved in with others due to financial problems. 10% did not pay the full amount of their rent, risking eviction or negative credit reports. And then 9% lived beyond the expected capacity of their dwelling, which can be a serious physical safety risk and a fire hazard. And I know I'm throwing out a lot of numbers at you, but these numbers represent real struggles that these students are experiencing every day, and it might be impacting their ability to succeed academically and also in their personal life. And then again, when we look at our special populations, parents, first generation students, and students who are identifying as LGBTQIA+, these students are all more likely to experience these indicators than their peers. So next, we're just going to briefly cover homelessness, which is the most severe form of housing insecurity and a major barrier to students reaching their full academic potentials. And while only 3 to 5%, you can see here in the second cluster, ever explicitly self-identified as homeless or unhoused, we saw that 14% of all undergraduates who responded to the survey had been unhoused since starting college or within the past 12 months. And the most common expression of homelessness occurred when students temporarily stayed with a family member or friend or couch surfed as they looked for housing, as we can see over here on the far left. And that we see also more, I think, troubling expressions of homelessness, including being kicked out of their home, being evicted from their home, and sleeping outdoors at 1% across both sectors. We also see that college students often struggle with one or more kinds of basic needs insecurity or BNI at the same time. And in the 2023 implementation, 58% of surveyed students had experienced either food insecurity or housing insecurity or homelessness in the prior 12 months. So not only threatening their mental and physical health, but their academics and longevity in college as well. Additionally, we saw 29% of the students who answered the survey faced both food and housing insecurity at the same time. And overall, we found that 9%, so nearly 1 in 10 of the students who responded to the survey, had dealt with all three forms in the past year or since starting college. And these numbers are higher than what was captured in the NIPSAS 2020, but they are in line with other voluntary surveys of college students, such as what we see with the Hope Center, Basic Needs, Real College Survey, and others. We also know that experiencing basic needs insecurity is directly associated with a lower GPA and an increased course failure rate. And a longitudinal study by Johns Hopkins revealed that students who experience food insecurity are 43% less likely to graduate from college. So these conditions, while relatively common among these students, are having far-reaching impacts on their lives and future careers. Now I'm going to pivot a little bit to our next focus area of student well-being, which is mental health, which we at Trellis consider to be a fundamental basic need, pivotal to student success and personal welfare. And good mental health is really essential for individuals to feel safe, to develop healthy relationships, and a positive sense of self-worth. With this in mind, our Student Financial Wellness Survey includes 2 short-form validated scales: the Patient Health Questionnaire 2, or the PHQ-2, which measures the frequency of depressed mood, and the GAD-2, which screens for generalized anxiety disorder. And using these 2 scales, our team found that mental health concerns, just like the food and housing challenges we just touched on, were really common among our respondents. So, in the 14 days leading up to the survey, 32% of our respondents reported symptoms of major depressive disorder, and then 43% indicated experiencing generalized anxiety disorder, which is the most common mental health challenge among college students generally. And some more indicators, because I love getting into the details here. We can see that 66% of our students had little interest or pleasure in doing things at least once in the prior 14 days. 62% felt down, depressed, or hopeless. And then we see higher prevalence of these kind of issues in the GAD-2, which measures, again, that generalized anxiety disorder, where nearly 4 in 5 students could not stop or control their worrying at least one day in the prior 2 weeks. And then 68% felt nervous, anxious, or on edge in that same frequency in that same time frame. And then 20% of our respondents, respectively, felt this anxious nearly every single day. So that's having some big impact on their day-to-day life. And then we also ask a similar question to the one on food pantries about mental health resources. And compared to food pantries, there seems to be a little bit more of a general awareness of mental health services, but still just around a third, 31% of our undergraduate students were unaware if their school had mental health services available to them. And our research finds that students who need these resources the most, like those struggling with depression or anxiety, are often more likely to be unaware of these types of resources available through their institution. So there really is kind of like an awareness and utilization gap for on-campus resources like mental health counseling or services, but also those food pantries that we touched on earlier. And then the last section here before I will kind of touch base on how to participate in our fall 2025 administration is kind of centering on student personas. So students have lots of other priorities in their lives that can pull them away from their academics. And one big one is working for pay while enrolled. So we saw that just over 2/3 of our respondents reported working part-time or full-time while in college. And these students are often putting in a lot of hours. So in the second chart down here, we can see that 41% reported working 40 or more hours in a typical 7-day work week, and then another 41% working 20 to 39 hours. So we're only seeing, about 1 in 5 students who are working a typical part-time job, fewer than 20 hours. That might be work study or something similar. But we are seeing, 82% of our students are working more than 20 hours for those students who are working. So this can really impact how students view themselves and in turn, how they set priorities. So we saw that 38% of students who worked while enrolled consider themselves to be workers who go to school rather than students who work. And this is particularly true among our community college respondents, where almost half of working students consider themselves workers compared to less than a third among four-year respondents. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but another really important part of the student identity is being a parent. And we saw 21% of our students self-identified as a parent in the survey. And again, this is more common in the two-year sector, where 27% of our two-year respondents were parents compared to 14% of our four-year students. And then just because we know that student parents are more likely to experience certain conditions and have certain lived experiences, I wanted to kind of cover what those differences look like. And on average, they look pretty different from our non-parenting students in a lot of ways. They are more likely to use credit sources like credit cards and loans to pay for school compared to their non-parenting peers. They're also less likely to have financial support from their family, less likely to report scholarships, and also less likely to be able to use savings to help pay for school. And this all makes sense, right? Kind of thinking about their priorities and how they're having to spend their cash. They also had kind of worse credit card behavior. They're more likely to say that they're not paying their credit card bill on time, and far less likely to say that they're paying off their balance each month. This really translates into almost all the parenting students in our survey are carrying balances month to month because they're not able to pay off that balance in full each time that bill comes due. We also see generally that parenting students are more financially insecure. Higher percentages of student parents said that they would have trouble getting $500 in the next month in an emergency situation. They're more likely to have reported running out of money. They're also more likely to experience food insecurity and housing insecurity, and also report that they are a first generation student. Parenting students in general were also more likely to report only attending online or remote classes, which can have real implications for their sense of belonging, their overall college experience, but also their ability to use on campus resources. And we see that too, where student parents are more likely to use an off campus food pantry than something on campus. And that might be because they're simply just not spending that much time at the campus of the institution. They're also already experiencing time poverty, which can really complicate their path to a credential because they're juggling a lot of different responsibilities, including parenting and working, and then trying to make everything else meet while they're also trying to be academically successful. So they're really a vulnerable population that deserves some focus. With all that, I always like to end on a more positive slide because we tend to cover a lot of depressing statistics. Depressing, but we do, right? We do know that these are the real lived experiences of these students. But we do also see that most of our students see their education as worth the investment. 72% agreed or strongly agreed that the cost of college is a good investment for their financial future. And then 83% reported that their family agreed or strongly agreed a college degree is worth the investment. So even with everything they're experiencing, the financial insecurity, the basic needs challenges, maybe some poor mental health or periods of poor mental health, we are still seeing that students feel like it's worth it. So that's always really heartening to see. And to just wrap it up here, I wanted to just briefly chat through how to participate in our upcoming 2025 Student Financial Wellness Survey for those who might be interested. And it feels like October is a long way away, but I know it's just gonna be a blink and we're gonna be there. So again, this is a free survey. We encourage any institution to participate. We've had over 300 schools participate since 2018, and many of them do come back year over year. So we'd love to see that. But we also love to onboard new institutions into the survey. And each school receives a customized report with peer group comparisons. So if you're a 2-year public community college, we do benchmark you against other public 2-year community colleges. We do the same thing for private 4 years. There are private 2 years as well. We've had them, folks from those schools participate, but we do benchmark you with folks in your sector. And that kind of helps you get a sense for how your campus is performing compared to your peers. We also create a one-page infographic that you can see over here that has been really effective, especially for kind of telling your leadership, hey, these things are happening on campus. Here's a one-page sheet that kind of gives you the lived experiences of our students and also covers what they're experiencing day to day. And then we also give all participating institutions access to ad hoc reporting at no cost. So we can do additional analysis on your school's data if you want to drill down into certain populations or issues. I could imagine something that folks on this call might be interested in would be looking at maybe students who are not aware of your food pantry. We've done that before and kind of run some analyses to see which groups of students are less likely or more likely to be aware of on-campus resources. And then we're always happy to present your results in a really similar slide deck to this to your campus stakeholders. And then lastly, we do aggregate everyone's data together. It's not tied to any schools. It's all just kind of added together, not linked to an individual institution. And then we use that aggregated data to publish reports on topics of interest to folks in this space. And we kind of make those reports available on our website for free. We have a pretty robust research library that you can take a look at that has a lot of different data points from the various implementations of the Student Financial Wellness Survey. And then we also can do a supplemental outcomes analysis. So this is a supplement to the main survey that takes your survey responses and connects them to institutional data on student success metrics 12 to 18 months after participation. So if you're going to participate in the fall 2025 Student Financial Wellness Survey, you would receive your report and infographic in the spring. And then a year to 18 months later, You could provide us with institutional data on students surveyed in the fall and then receive an outcomes analysis report that kind of checks on how the students are doing and sees if there's any statistical relationship between their survey responses and their academic outcomes. And you can learn more about the Student Financial Wellness Survey by going to www.trellisstrategies.org/SFWS or using this QR code. Hopefully it works. Sometimes they just will break. But if they're hopefully it is working. Otherwise, you can just Google Trellis Strategies SFWS. That will pop it up as well. The website does outline the participation process, answers some commonly asked questions, some FAQs, and then also has promotional documents to help make the case to your institutional leadership on why you should participate in the survey. And then you can also use there's a form on the website to connect with us if you have questions or want to sign up. But you can also email us at surveys@trellisstrategies.org, and that goes directly to me and the rest of the Student Financial Wellness Survey team. And we'll get back to you usually within 1 to 2 business days, if not sooner than that. And then lastly, this last page just takes you to the sign up page for our monthly newsletter that kind of highlights our free survey offerings. We do the Student Financial Wellness Survey, it's our main kind of survey product, but we are also offering other national survey products, and they would get kind of pings on that and other opportunities through the newsletter if you're interested. And with that, those are all the slides that I have, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions or dive deeper into any of the data points I covered. I've been doing research with food insecurity, on food pantries, on basic needs insecurity generally, and mental health for about 10 years now. So I have a lot that we can chat through, but just want to see if there's any questions or anything else for me.
Allison, thank you so much. It was so great to see what y'all have done with the data that you've collected and the way you're able to tell the story of this experience that's happening for students across the country. So again, thank you for sharing the resource, and really no downside in our schools jumping in and getting a resource that's specific to their campuses and their students, to do, like you said, share with leaders and share with their students about what the issue is, but also the solutions that they are offering on campus. One of the questions that came up in the chat, and I don't see that it came up, so I'm not sure if this is information that y'all are collecting at the moment. But do you have any data on how many of the students surveyed were commuters versus students maybe living on campus?
I do think so. Full disclosure, the Student Financial Wellness Survey, it's a long instrument, but it is really robust. We find that it takes students often about 10 to 15 minutes to complete, but we do include quite a few demographics questions. I'm just pulling up um, our survey results from last year. So I can't remember every single question we asked off the top of my head, but I do believe we check to see if they live on campus, and we do. So we ask if they live on an on-campus resident, an off-campus college or university affiliated resident, or an off-campus private, not college or university affiliated home. And then we also check in if they have no current residence or homeless. So we do kind of check in on if they are living on or off campus, and we also check if they're a dependent or independent student as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I hope that answers the question. I'm going to open the floor for an opportunity for anyone else on the call that might have a question to offer it in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand and we'll invite you to come off mute. This is your moment to ask any questions about what you saw, or questions about the survey instrument. Allison, it appears you did a very thorough job walking us through that experience. For folks who are interested in signing up, when I know you shared the sign up information, and of course we'll be sharing that all after the call, but is there a deadline for when a school would need to opt in so that they can participate?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So this upcoming administration, we usually have the cutoff date in mid-September, so we can accept the student data after your census date. We want to make sure that things are accurate, but we do, I think, ask everyone to complete all the steps by early October. I don't think we have that exact date hammered out yet for 2025, but in the 4 or 5 years that I've been running the survey, it's usually about 2 to 3 weeks before we launch. So that'd be early October, probably around October 1st. We want everything in.
Fantastic. And how long is the survey period for students to participate?
Yeah, that's another good question. So let's see. Last year, we ran the survey from October. Let me see if I have an exact date. Last year we ran it from maybe like October 21st to November 13th, something like that. It's always kind of like right before Halloween and then a week or two before everyone breaks for Thanksgiving. So really trying to make sure we're not surveying during any holidays. And then we can work with your institution if you want kind of like a custom um, launch schedule and reminder schedule within the broader window. We can facilitate that, but we can't, everyone launches at the same time. And we do separate out 2 years launch on Monday and then 4 year institutions launch on Tuesday. And that kind of just helps us keep track and we're not overloading the Qualtrics servers with a million students coming out in one day.
I can imagine when we're talking about the possibility of 700,000 students
Right.
participating, we just want to be sure that we have the capacity for that. I totally relate.
Absolutely.
One more question coming in from the chat. After you collect all the data, is the raw data available for secondary analysis from the campus?
Yeah, another good question, and maybe the most common question we get from schools. And we are, in the past, we've not been able to do that. We've had our kind of IRB, our Institutional Review Board application worded a certain way and have been really particular. But we really want institutions to get as much value from the survey as possible. So starting in 2025, for any institutions who may have participated in the past or are interested in participating now, we are going to be offering a de-identified data file for institutions to do their own analysis, and that will be provided early in the spring. So we can't do raw. We want to make sure that we're protecting student confidentiality, but we will do a de-identified data file, making sure, if there's a small group of students on campus, we want to make sure to mask any of that data, but we will be able to provide that raw or that de-identified data file to participating institutions.
Wow, that alone, that's amazing. Thank you for
I'm
offering.
really excited about it. So yeah.
Yes, that's a big win. That's awesome. Great time for our campuses to start opting in too. Let's do it. I love that. I think that's all of our questions. Again, super thorough. Thank you for sharing all of your learnings, and I'm excited to share this out with the rest of the network and see the feedback that we get. Um, Tammy, thank you for throwing that in. Just another, kudos to your work. The infographic handout, it has been a big help on their campus with
Yeah, I'd
keeping
love to see
partners.
that. Yeah, thanks so much, Tammy. A lot of the times we will send out the reports, send out the infographics, and then we don't get to see how it's implemented or shared on campus. So I just love to see that. And then thinking about, I think I mentioned we can do custom ad hoc analysis. We can also make custom infographics. So if you wanted to take something focused just on basic needs or finances to your leadership, we can facilitate that as well. So we're really just here to help institutions, and we want to make sure that the results are usable and practical for your campus. So just give us a shout and we're happy to help.
What an incredible resource. Thank you so much. All right, for the sake of time, folk, we're gonna jump just to the last few things that we have here. But again, a big round of applause for Allison and sharing the work that they're doing so well at Trellis Strategies. And I look forward to hearing from campuses throughout the next year all the wins that we get from this resource.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Candace.
So let me go ahead and pull up my screen one more time for y'all. I shared this at the beginning that we were going to have a new toolkit available. Thank you to our leadership council, to our student advisory council, and of course, Sage McCoy, who helps with all of our toolkits on the team. This is a new one that we're really glad to be bringing y'all, but wanted to make sure you are aware that this is out there. So as of today, you'll be able to access the Using Data to Drive Impact Toolkit, where we took about a lot of resources like Trellis Strategies, but also things that you can do on campus and some best practices that we see campuses and the network offering now. So when you head over to this toolkit, you're going to be able to see information about why you should consider collecting data about your programming, what data could be collected, should be collected, how you could go about collecting it. We talk about resources within the network that could help you with collecting the data, like working with the Pantry Soft, how to analyze the data, and then how to use it to share what's working really well with your programs and opportunities for your programs, which we find is really important to share with our leaders, our community partners, our funders, and we want you all to have that at your fingertips to expand how you're able to serve your students. Again, best practices are there, some um, sample surveys that campuses are using right now, that campuses that were willing to share that with us, sample one pagers that they're using to promote their programs. It's all there. So definitely hope that y'all take a moment to check that out. And then, hard to believe, we've been together a full academic year already. So, I have to promote the last two opportunities that you'll see from Swipe for the academic year. Don't worry, we'll be around all summer. But for the academic year, on May 7th, our last town hall of the year, where we're going to talk about advocacy, what's been happening with our advocacy program, some wins that we had this year, some states that had some bill passing. We want to promote that, of course. So join us May 7th. You'll be able to RSVP. And then the very last academic year swipe session. This is another one that y'all really pushed for, and we're so glad that we're able to bring it to you. It's going to be on May 13th, and we'll be talking about dining providers, how to work with your dining provider, how y'all could collaborate, and things that you can do together beyond meal swipe drives. We ask, that's like the number one question we hear in one-on-ones and meetings. What can we do with our dining provider besides donated meal swipes? So we're going to talk about things we're seeing in the network, big wins, events, promotions, ways to serve your students. So definitely sign up for that one, May 13th. And then, as always, at the end of this call, feel free to jump into Slack. We'll be able to continue the conversation, ask more questions, provide more resources if y'all would like. And then the survey is up on the screen right now. If you can, with your phone, scan the QR code. If not, when you close out of this call, it'll give you an opportunity to switch over to the survey. We really love when you guys tell us how we did today. What did you learn? And what else would you like to learn? That's how we get the content. So please fill out the survey. So grateful you all joined us today, and I'll hang on the call for a couple more minutes for anyone that has questions. Sage, thanks for dropping the survey link in the chat. I'll stay on for anyone who has questions, but otherwise, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and we'll see you next month. Thank y'all.